David Temple executed his wife and his unborn child?
She was found killed in her own home, which came after a shocking Texas forever. One crime, 2 decades of lies, and a shocking fight for justice.
Jurors have sentenced David Temple to life in prison for murdering his pregnant wife, Belinda Temple.
In 1999, Texas high school football coach David Temple was literally living the dream. He was respected in his community, admired by students, and married to his high school sweetheart, Belinda. But then, a horrible twist happened. It all began on January 11th, 1999, when Belinda was attacked and killed in her home. What first looked like a burglary gone wrong was about to become one of Texas's most astonishing cold cases. It was a brutal case in 1999, and a secret that refused to stay buried.
In the end, this needs to be about Belinda and that baby. That's the story right there, and how their lives were taken. That's what this needs to be about.
On the afternoon of January 11th, 1999, the quiet suburb of Katy, Texas, was shaken by a crime that would haunt the community for decades. Belinda Temple, a 30-year-old teacher and mother-to-be who was 8 months pregnant, was just weeks away from giving birth to her second child. Friends said that she was a devoted wife and a kind-hearted woman who couldn't wait to embrace motherhood. But that day, her life and the life of her unborn baby were brutally cut short inside her own home. It all started when neighbors noticed something wrong. Belinda hadn't shown up to work and wasn't answering her calls. People got worried because she was 8 months pregnant, and her family knew that she wouldn't disappear without any reason. That day, when her husband walked in with their son, he found a nightmare inside their home.
County 911 police fire ambulance.
Yes, somebody's broken into my house and my wife has been shot.
Stay on the line for the ambulance, sir.
Oh, I just walked in, my wife, I believe she's been shot. It's got blood everywhere.
Okay, sir, is she breathing?
No, so I believe her brain is on the floor. I think she's already dead. She's 8 months pregnant.
Later that day, David Temple returned home with their 3-year-old son and claimed he had found the awful scene of Belinda dead in the master bedroom. She had been shot. That too in the back of the head with a shotgun, execution style. The force of the blast ended not only her life, but also that of her unborn child, who was a boy she had already named Aaron. The violent nature of the crime stunned even the most seasoned investigators. At first glance, it seemed to be nothing more than a burglary gone wrong. The back door had been shattered, drawers were left open, and the house looked robbed. But as detectives went on to study the details, everything didn't quite add up.
Does this look like someone maybe entered into your house?
Yeah, somebody's entered in my house. The back window is broken and my back door is still wide open.
Even with all the evident chaos, nothing of real value had been taken. Jewelry, electronics, and cash were left untouched. The house looked staged, as if someone wanted the investigators to believe it was a break-in. At this time, David told officers that he had been at a nearby park with their 3-year-old son when the shooting happened. He claimed that he had returned home only to find the result of the whole attack. But questions came up almost immediately. Why would a burglar target a heavily pregnant woman in broad daylight? Why would they kill her execution style but leave behind every valuable item in the house? Something seemed off to everyone around. There were no broken locks, no forced entry. Her killer was already inside.
A burglar is gonna ransack. It's not his drawers pulled open. The drawers are gonna be ransacked. They're gonna be looking for things in the drawers. And we didn't have that. On top of the dresser was a jewelry box. And that is, of course, where the tray was that had Mr. Temple's watch and some other jewelry.
And all that was still there?
Yes, sir. If this was a true burglar, just take the whole box. We found her purse.
Detectives also noticed that Belinda's body was positioned in a way that suggested she may have known her killer. There were no signs of a struggle at the entry point. Instead, the struggle seemed to have taken place in the bedroom, which is a deeply personal and intimate setting. Whoever pulled the trigger had likely been close to her, someone she trusted enough to let inside. It was like Belinda already knew her killer. As detectives investigated the area, they found that no one had seen strangers lurking around the home that afternoon. However, neighbors did report that there had been a lot of tension and arguments between Belinda and David in the weeks before Belinda's death. The couple's marriage, which was once seen to be strong, had been in a bad condition. There was something off with David's behavior in the whole situation. While he calmly played the role of a grieving husband, many noticed a lack of genuine emotion in his manner. Calm, collected, almost too controlled, his act raised more questions than answers. The shotgun used in the crime was never found. But the way Belinda was killed, which was a single, calculated shot to the back of the head, seemed more like a personal execution than a random act of violence.
Tell me I can do it. I
You
don't...
know how to do CPR?
Yes.
Okay, I want you to do CPR for that baby.
Okay.
Okay?
Yes.
Are you doing CPR for me?
I can't. Her head's gone.
Okay, well, let's see if we can use her, okay, for the baby.
Jesus Christ.
Within hours, detectives were piecing together the shocking possibility that this was not a burglary at all, but rather one that appeared to be specifically targeted. And as rumors spread, all eyes turned to the person who would benefit most from her death, her husband, David Temple.
Belinda was very devoted, very dedicated to her profession there at Katy High School. She loved her kids. Her kids loved her. David's co-workers over at A-Leaf learned about some of the other things that had been going on. I got a phone call from an officer in the A-Leaf ISD system, and he basically said, hey, I can't confirm any of this at this point, but rumors going around that he may be involved with somebody else.
The discovery of Belinda's body was only the start of a story that would take 20 years to find justice. What was seen as a burglary inside a quiet suburban home on a Monday afternoon then turned into a case filled with betrayal, lies, and the shocking truth about a man who was willing to destroy everything for his own desires. As investigators dug deeper into Belinda Temple's murder, the cracks in David Temple's story began to grow. The first major red flag was the supposed break-in. The back door had been shattered outward and not inward. To experienced detectives, this simply meant that the glass had been broken from the inside of the house, and not by an intruder forcing entry. The scene looked carefully staged, as if someone wanted the cops to believe a burglar had struck. Yet nothing valuable was missing. Jewelry remained in plain sight, electronics were untouched, and cash lay as it was. It was a burglary that made no sense. Everyone then turned to David Temple's alibi. He told police that he had taken his 3-year-old son to a nearby park and grocery store that afternoon, conveniently placing himself away from the house during the time of the murder. But witnesses had a different story. A cashier remembered David shopping casually, showing no signs of distress or urgency. He was seen pushing his son in a cart, buying only a few items. This was a trip that some investigators later suggested was a deliberate move to create a paper trail. David's behavior after Belinda's death also seemed doubtful to those around him. Somehow it didn't feel right. While friends and family thought that he would be shattered, he became detached. His reaction spoke louder than words, and it wasn't grief. Instead of clinging to memories of his wife, he began distancing himself. Within months, the truth was seen. Another woman was already in the picture. Rumors began to spread that he had been intimately involved with another woman even before Belinda was killed. That woman was Heather Scott, a fellow teacher at the same school where David worked as a coach. Their relationship had been rumored about for months, with some colleagues even noticing flirtatious exchanges between them. At first, David denied the affair, but when pressed, the truth came out that he had indeed been romantically involved with Heather while still married to Belinda. This big reveal turned the investigation upside down. Prosecutors began building a motive rooted in betrayal and desire. Belinda's pregnancy was supposed to be a time of joy, but for David, it showed him a life he no longer wanted. Raising another child meant responsibility, sacrifice, and the end of his chances to start fresh with Heather. For investigators, the theory was simple and clear. David saw murder as his escape route, but motive alone wouldn't be enough. Police searched for the murder weapon, a shotgun, but it was never recovered to this day. Still, they found that David's father owned multiple firearms, and one of them matched the type used in the killing. The missing weapon left a gap, but circumstantial evidence kept pointing back to David. Another troubling clue was the timing. Belinda was killed in broad daylight, inside her own home, with no forced entry, showing a violent confrontation at the door. This showed that she knew her killer and had likely let him in willingly. Who else, investigators asked, would she have trusted in that moment more than her husband? At the same time, Belinda's friends revealed that she had told them about her struggling marriage. She knew David was distant, and some even doubted that she had already discovered the affair. Belinda had told her friends and family many times that she knew she was trapped, but she still wanted to have her baby and still wanted to fight for her marriage. This personal information added weight to the theory that David had felt cornered and was desperate to escape the life he didn't want anymore. Still, the case wasn't easy to solve. There was no physical evidence, no fingerprints, no DNA, no weapon that tied David directly to the crime scene. With no forensic proof, prosecutors would have to rely heavily on circumstantial evidence, witness testimony, and the story of motive. As months turned into years, the case grew cold. David continued his life, eventually marrying Heather Scott just 2 years after Belinda's death. To many, this was the ultimate confirmation of his guilt, that the crime had cleared the path for the life he wanted all along. But again, without undeniable evidence, prosecutors hesitated to come to a verdict. Theories were rejected. Some believed David had executed his wife to escape his marriage, while others clung to the idea of an unknown intruder. The truth seemed just out of reach. For nearly 10 years, Belinda's family fought for answers, convinced David was responsible. Their persistence kept the case alive until, finally, in 2004, prosecutors felt they had enough to bring charges. What followed was one of Texas's most controversial and closely watched trials. It was a courtroom battle that would divide public opinion and drag on for years. Things took a turn in 2004, 5 years after Belinda Temple's brutal case. Prosecutors finally believed they had enough reasons to take David Temple to court. The case had haunted Katy, Texas, and divided opinions. To Belinda's family, David was a cold, calculating killer. To his supporters, he was a grieving husband who was wrongly accused. The first trial began in 2007, and from the start, prosecutors showed David as a man living a double life. They put down the evidence, which included the staged burglary, the broken glass pointing to an inside job, the affair with Heather Scott, and his emotionless behavior after Belinda's death. The jury heard how Belinda was 8 months pregnant, just weeks away from giving birth, yet David was carrying on a romance with another woman and making plans for a new future. To prosecutors, this wasn't about love, it was about escape. David didn't want to be settled down with a growing family. Belinda and the baby were obstacles, and death was his way out. Even though no physical evidence directly linked him to the shooting, prosecutors leaned heavily on circumstantial evidence and character portrayal. The defense was strong. They countered aggressively. They claimed the investigation was not right and that the detectives had a biased look from the start. They also said that the police ignored other possible suspects. They pointed to burglaries that had happened in the area, arguing Belinda's death could have been the result of one such crime gone wrong. They also highlighted the absence of a murder weapon, fingerprints, or DNA tying David to the crime. Without direct evidence, the defense insisted, the state's case was built on speculation. There was only one person on this earth who had the motive, the means, and the opportunity to cause her death. State prosecutor Lisa Tanner told jurors, saying that he wanted to kill his wife so he could be with his mistress. But the defense disagrees. "We're going to go back in time," David Temple's attorney, Stanley Schneider, told jurors. "We're going to hear a story of not one betrayal, but 2 betrayals. Even after these efforts, the jury found David Temple guilty of murder in 2007, sentencing him to life in prison.
Phone call I got that night at 10 minutes to 9 on Monday night of January 11th. I said he was guilty then. 20 and a half years later, David Temple was still guilty.
For Belinda's family, it was justice at last. For David's supporters, it was a miscarriage of justice. But the story didn't end there. Years later, appeals revealed troubling details about the trial. In 2015, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals overturned David's conviction, citing misconduct by the prosecution. Key evidence, including police reports and witness statements that might have supported David's defense, had been kept back. This revelation shook public confidence in the fairness of the case and renewed debate over whether David was truly guilty. The reversal didn't mean David was innocent. It was only that he was entitled to a new trial. And so, in 2019, more than 20 years after Belinda's murder, David Temple faced a jury once again. The second trial was even more dramatic than the first. Prosecutors doubled down on the motive: David's affair with Heather Scott and his desire for a new life. They described him as a man who executed his pregnant wife because she no longer fit into his plans. Witnesses testified about the strained marriage, the suspicious timeline, and David's lack of grief. The defense, once again, bounced back and knocked away at the lack of physical evidence. They argued that the state was twisting circumstantial evidence to fit their story by ignoring other viable facts. They also leaned on the misconduct in the first trial, showing David as a victim of a system that was eager to convict at any cost. It was also during this time that Heather, who then became his ex-wife, had testified in court against him.
So you knew he was married?
Yes, at that time, yes.
Did you know he had a child?
I found out, yes.
Did you become affectionate with him after you knew he was married?
Yes, I did.
And after he had a child?
Yes.
And his wife was pregnant?
Yes.
The jurors took a couple of days of deliberation and ultimately returned to the same verdict. David Temple was found guilty again. There was one difference with this sentence. In 2020, he was sentenced to life in prison with the eligibility for parole after 30 years. The verdict brought many mixed emotions. For Belinda's family, it was the justice they had long fought for. It was a confirmation that David was finally being held accountable. For others, doubt still stayed back. The lack of direct evidence, the overturned conviction, and the controversy around the case kept debates alive. Some argued David had been tried more on his infidelity and character flaws than on hard facts. Even today, the Temple case remains one of Texas's most polarizing. It raises many unsettling questions and debates amongst people. Can a man be convicted of murder without physical evidence? Was justice served, or was it shaped by public perception and emotion? One thing is certain: Belinda Temple, a young mother full of hope, and her unborn child lost their lives in an act of unimaginable cruelty. The trials may have ended, but the shadow of this case continues to haunt everyone connected to it. The Temple case reminds us that sometimes justice is not clear-cut, and truth can be clouded by perception, bias, and missing pieces. What remains certain is the wounding loss of a young woman and her unborn child, which is a loss that no verdict or sentence can ever truly heal.